Breaking news straight from the front, a blow to the reputation of elite mercenaries. The Ukrainian Armed Forces struck the enemy. The occupiers themselves couldn't understand how it happened. Armored vehicles, aircraft, wrecked. The Black Sea is a complete trap. Putin's latest attempts to intimidate Ukraine. Is the end already near? All this in our episode Hellish Point. Urgently from the Kursk region, our forces have once again broken into enemy territory, but this time from another direction. An unexpected surprise? Z channels are whining. How is this possible? Meanwhile, the armed forces of Ukraine only hint that it's no time to relax. The front is on fire. The enemy is creeping up on Dnipropetrovsk region and terrorizing Kherson region. What is known about this? We'll tell you in just a moment.
For several days now, Russian war correspondents and Z channels have been claiming that the armed forces of Ukraine have launched an offensive in the area of the village of Tyotkino and the village of Popovo-Ležache in the Glushkovsky district. Not so long ago, Russian generals were reporting that they had driven the Ukrainian armed forces out of the Kursk region. But it turns out the Ukrainian army is once again on Russian soil.
The enemy has launched a new offensive in the Kursk region, trying to cut off Tyotkino. At night, the enemy blew up bridges with missiles, and in the morning sent armored groups into the attack. First, mine-clearing vehicles began making passages through the minefields, followed by armored vehicles carrying troops. A fierce battle is raging on the border. Our paratroopers and other units are destroying the enemy.
The Russian Federation redeployed part of its troops from the Kursk region to other directions, and it seems that the armed forces of Ukraine took advantage of the element of surprise and launched a new counterattack in this direction.
When Gerasimov reported to Putin that they had completely liberated the Kursk territory, that was not true. But we withdrew, and they pulled a large number of forces and equipment out. There were up to 90,000 of them on a relatively small section of the front. They were moved to the Kharkiv and possibly the Pokrovsk direction.
In the Kherson region, Russian occupiers are beginning preparations for an amphibious operation. Since the end of April, the Russian army has been attempting to land troops on small islands that are currently under the control of Ukraine's defense forces.
The enemy is trying to cross the water barrier, to cross the channels in the southern part of the Dnipro Island zone, where the Bugaz Islands are located, where Kozulisky Island is, and to land on these islands, seize a small foothold there, and then proceed to cross the Dnipro precisely in this southern zone.
The Russian army plans to gradually capture the islands, which will allow them to expand the strike zone for Russian equipment. Preparations are underway for an airborne operation, in particular for unmanned aerial vehicles in drones and mortars.
From time to time, enemy vehicles appear there. Usually there is a multiple rocket launcher system stationed there in particular. And from there, we also experience a large number of attacks on our city, Ochakiv, in the Mykolaiv region. What is the purpose of this operation by the Russian Federation, by the Russian army? The capture, the gradual seizure of the islands allows them to expand the strike zone for their equipment.
The Ukrainian command of the Defense Forces South is aware of such plans and maneuvers, and they monitor the movement of literally every boat and every mortar. At present, the enemy in the Kherson direction does not have enough watercraft or personnel to carry out such a large-scale assault. Currently, the most tense area on the front is the border between Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions. The commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Syrsky, wrote that the Pokrovsk direction is one of the most difficult sections of the front in the Russian-Ukrainian war. According to him, the defense forces soldiers have managed to stabilize the situation is not in this operational zone in Donetsk region, and in some places it even seized the tactical initiative.
According to the data from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the intensity of combat operations has increased significantly over the past week. In just 6 days this week, there have already been 1,219 attacks compared to 1,150 over 7 days last week. The enemy was most active this week on the Pokrovsk sector, 42% of all attacks. High intensity also remains on the Novopavlivka sector, 13.7%, the Lyman sector, 12.7%, and the Kursk sector, 12%. Altogether, these four directions account for 80% of all enemy assault actions.
Despite the fact that the Russian army is only 2.5 kilometers from the administrative border of the Dnipropetrovsk region, the front in this area remains stable, and the armed forces of Ukraine are in control of it. The advance of the occupiers in this direction has been stopped.
For even more high-profile events from the life of Ukraine and the world, read our Telegram channel, Times of Ukraine. Only the latest news and verified information. See the link in the description below the ad video. Sea drones are going out on the hunt. Ukraine did this for the first time. Putin's Sukhois fell apart. An epic moment. After that, the advantage shifted to the armed forces of Ukraine. The Russians are making a fuss and don't want to take to the skies over the Black Sea waters. They're afraid of falling into the sea and becoming food for the fish. All the most interesting things are just beginning. Could the next strike be on the Crimean Bridge? We'll talk about that in just a moment.
No one has ever done anything like this to them before. For the first time in history, Ukraine shot down a military aircraft with a naval drone. Our defense intelligence confirmed the destruction and published this video as proof.
Igor, Sairotyuk. And by the way, this is not the first time enemy aircraft has been destroyed. But before this, it was helicopters.
After a day, some details also began to emerge. In particular, the head of the main intelligence directorate, Kirilo Budanov, clarified in an interview with the War Zone that 3 unmanned Magura V-7 boats took part in the attack, 2 of which fired at the aircraft. At the same time, 2 Russian Su-30SM attack aircraft were destroyed. One of the crews was killed while the other managed to eject. The Russians immediately sent a civilian vessel after him, hoping that Ukraine would not violate the rules of war and would not fire on civilians.
Despite the fact that the Ukrainians had plenty of opportunities to destroy this civilian cargo ship along with the Russian military crew, they did not take advantage of them. They watched. As the crew was being evacuated, they circled around the crew members who were floundering in the water, but nevertheless, they did not fire a single shot at either the cargo ship or the crew.
It also seems that the situation has become clearer regarding which missiles the Ukrainian Magura drones were firing. In particular, a photo has appeared online showing a naval drone equipped with an American AM-9 air-to-air missile. Earlier versions of these unmanned surface vehicles were armed with Soviet R-73 missiles.
What makes this unique? Well, really, the fact that this is a remote-controlled, surface-based system, remote-controlled, that's very important, managed to shoot down a manned object. And if we talk about the cost, for example, the Magura costs around $250,000 to $300,000, while a Russian Su-30 costs $40 to $50 million. So you can compare or estimate how many times cheaper the means of destruction is compared to the much more expensive target it takes out.
At the same time, analysts point out that it's not even about the money, although the Kremlin is increasingly having problems with that as well. The main issue is technology and production capacity, which in Russia have either been lost or are in severe shortage due to Western sanctions.
Every Su-30SM aircraft is worth its weight in gold. The issue lies with the components. It's difficult to obtain them bypassing the sanctions. Moreover, as far as I know, Su-30SMs are either not being produced at all or are barely being produced.
In addition to the obvious results of destroying Russian aircraft, this attack brought another advantage to the Ukrainian Armed Forces. The enemy can't be said to be completely demoralized now, but they are definitely terrified. Having lost 2 comrades and most likely hearing about 2 more who were unexpectedly fished out of the Black Sea, one can only imagine the mood with which they will now fly missions over the Black Sea area.
The crews of Russian aircraft flying over the Black Sea, who now realize that they no longer have any security. Yes, even if they don't see us, if their targeting radars don't pick up our weapons, that doesn't mean those weapons aren't there, and these weapons, these types of weapons have now actually targeted their aircraft.
It's not any easier, by the way, for the pilot's command either. After all, even if the radars detect Ukrainian Magura drones, now that won't automatically be followed by a clear order for the aircraft to take off. Because now the leadership of the Russian Air Force understands there's no guarantee that the next pilots on duty will get out of this unscathed.
Every time the Ukrainians launch an operation in the Black Sea, Russia faces a very tough choice about what to lose, oil and gas platforms, or say some other installations in the Black Sea, or for example their assets in Crimea, because these unmanned boats can also carry drones. In other words, they're like mini aircraft carriers. Or maybe they'll have to lose another helicopter or a Su-30SM fighter jet.
Enemy equipment is burning. This is exactly the kind of enthusiasm our troops are showing on the eastern front line. Minus 100 infantrymen. The enemy is trying to squeeze through even the smallest gaps. Ukrainian forces intercept them and crush their desire to move any further. Now, that's a powerful punch. This is a shocking video. The occupiers pulled off quite a stunt near Toretsk. What happened this time? We'll tell you in just a moment.
A new attempt by the occupiers to storm in the Vovchansk direction ended in defeat. The Russians tried to break through the four-post brigade's defenses on motorcycles, but they were stopped by FPV drones. In the Kharkiv region, border guard UAV operators destroyed enemy vehicles, a surveillance camera, and an automatic grenade launcher position. They also completely demolished 3 shelters. A border guard from the Guard Brigade is also taking out the enemy with kamikaze drones. The fighter with the call sign Mali has been in the military for a year now. He knows how to assemble a drone, set it up, and load the munitions. But he insists that training is never unnecessary.
Well, at our post, the guys were doing flips and spins. They could even put someone else's goggles on and start pulling off such tricks and that it would make your head spin. Well, that's just showing off. In reality, the whole job is much slower than it seems. You don't always fly straight down to the target like an arrow. Mostly, if it's some dugouts or hidden equipment in revetments, you actually try to do it slowly, smoothly, and carefully.
In the Kupiansk sector, the Phoenix unit is showcasing their achievements for the week. The fighters have hunted down and destroyed quite a bit of equipment. A Tor anti-aircraft missile system, a Dikbutirov and Memstes self-propelled howitzer, tanks, a cannon, and 24 military trucks.
I see the enemy in front of me. That is, I saw the enemy right in front of me. He looked at me, I looked at him. He immediately opened fire on me, right at my firing port. And then a battle broke out between us. The infantry couldn't do anything. They just literally called in an airstrike on us.
Russian units are trying to advance in the Serebryansky forest. The positions are being defended, among others, by the Shkval border guards. Due to the peculiarities of the landscape, the occupiers use equipment here only to a limited extent, more often resorting to infantry assaults or striking our positions from the air. Nevertheless, the defenders are repelling Russian assaults.
Definitely, we haven't lost a single position. Even if we did lose one, we at least managed to take it back whole. We actually captured and restored it just a couple of days ago. So we definitely haven't lost any part of the front line.
For almost a year now, the defense forces have been bravely holding Toretsk. The city is practically wiped off the face of the earth. The fighting is now taking place closer to the outskirts. Among the defenders are also the soldiers of the 101st Security Brigade of the General Staff, who are fighting for every inch of their native land. And in this video from Azov, you can see yet another attempt by the occupiers to break through the battle lines of the National Guard fighters and the 49th Assault Battalion. Carpathian Sich at any cost. Infantry on motorcycles, flying tricolors and red banners, tried to plant their rags on the ruins but ended up staying under them. On the Pokrovsk direction, the Russians have once again increased the pressure. Apparently they are preparing for a holiday. The fighting here does not stop for even an hour. The Russians are advancing in small groups, but it's all in vain. Our UAV operators stopped these unwelcome guests. The Spartans carried out a lightning-fast operation, broke into territory controlled by the enemy and recaptured the position. The fighters disembarked from an APC, which later supported the coordinated actions of the infantry with its fire. The past days have also been intense for the Black Zaporizhians. The warriors dealt with tanks, artillery, Russian soldiers, took them prisoner, and also destroyed enemy drones. Recently, 22-year-old Mikhailo joined the 72nd Brigade. He followed the example of his father, who has been in the military for almost 30 years. The young man is convinced the fate of the Ukrainian army is in the hands of the youth.
And young guys, they are energetic, livelier, and more motivated. We need to show that we have strength and that we are not so easy to conquer. Well, that's basically what we're proving right now.
On the Novopavlivka front, the soldiers of the 23rd Separate Mechanized Brigade continue, day by day, to reduce the presence of the invaders. With precision and ruthlessness, drone operators target enemy forces, equipment, and shelters. The day before, the Russians launched a large number of attacks along the stretch from Novopil to Vilnopol. These shots are from the 31st Separate Mechanized Brigade, which was repelling the assault. The enemy advanced on motorcycles, ATVs, and other vehicles. In the battle, the Russians lost nearly 100 infantrymen. With faith in our soldiers, Tetiana Litvin, Inter, Podrobitsi, United News Marathon.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
A new predator of Ukrainian victory is on the front line. The footage is so captivating that you want to watch it over and over again. Minigrads show no mercy, tearing the occupiers to pieces. The ruthless steel of our fury strikes right on target. What is this new weapon of vengeance? Watch the exclusive report right now.
Fire! This is how the Zaporizhzhia Minigrad Sokoli systems operate. The crew of the combat vehicle deploys, loads the launcher, and destroys the occupiers, all within 5 minutes.
They worked with the 128th Brigade and...
We worked with the 128th Brigade. They provided a live stream and adjusted the fire. There is a hit. It hits better than the factory-made one because the distance between the rockets is smaller. That's why the accuracy is better. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the Sheikh Mansour Volunteer Battalion fighters have been helping the armed forces strike the occupiers in the Zaporizhzhia direction. But in addition to this, the fighters also manufacture rockets for the Zaporizhzhia Grad systems.
We collect rockets that haven't been fired. They're also called abortive. We rework them, just like we did during our own war. We started in each Korea, and here we continue our struggle.
Fire.
And in this workshop, work on creating mini multiple launch rocket systems never stops. At 17, Maxim developed his first system, and for 3 years now he has been improving them. Each new vehicle is better than the previous one, more mobile and more functional. Everything is done to make the soldiers' work easier.
Each subsequent one will be slightly modified, improved, and reworked. Now we have electronic sights. We're upgrading it to improve performance, installing electric drives, so it can be deployed and packed up more quickly. Maxim says that it takes 2 weeks to make one of these mini Mellors. There are 15 of us, and in 2 weeks we're able to build 2 launchers in parallel. We get these rails from captured Grad systems. It's a lend-lease from Russia, so to speak. Again, from one factory-made Grad system, we can make 12 of our launchers.
The developers call the Sokol a sniper rifle because unlike the factory-made Grads, it hits its target precisely.
We use only 3 rails, 3 shots, 3 hits on target, and everything is good. This is what we call a partisan. It can drive up very quickly and deploy just as fast. The most important thing is to strike very accurately and then leave the position quickly, because the safety and lives of our soldiers are the top priority.
To help the guys out there, those who are on the front lines, because bringing out large vehicles takes a long time and they aren't maneuverable. But this little machine arrives quickly, does its job, and leaves. Plus, it's very accurate.
Sokoli are made for the military free of charge. To raise funds, the charitable foundation organizes fairs and appreciates every contribution. They also cooperate with international partners.
A lot of vehicles come from the United Kingdom. Sometimes a vehicle might deliver, say, ammunition or soldiers to the mission site, and that could be the end of its service life. That's why we encourage everyone to join in and support the fundraising efforts.
Charity organizations have already delivered 62 Sokoli Minigrad systems to the armed forces. They say there are a lot of orders and all of them were needed yesterday. Kira Ova, Serhii Kopovka, Zaporizhzhia, TSN 1+1, Marathon, United News.
Urgently, Putin has made a dangerous decision. He will leave Belarus once again. Lukashenko is preparing to take a decisive step. The West is seriously alarmed. Absolutely. Everyone will be affected. What is really behind the latest exercises in Belarus and what this could lead to? You'll find out more in just a moment.
Russia is planning to drag Belarus into the war and is already preparing a new attack from its territory this summer. President Zelensky announced this during his speech at the Three Seas Summit. According to him, the planned joint exercises of the aggressor country and its satellite are a real threat that must be taken seriously. Similar exercises, which the participants referred to as mere training, actually turned out to be combat coordination before the invasion of Ukraine. That's usually how this kind of escalation starts, and that's how they usually begin.
That's exactly how its new attacks usually begin. But where it will be this time, I don't know. Ukraine, Lithuania, Poland, God forbid. But we all have to be ready. All our instructions are ready for cooperation. Through our intelligence services, we are ready to share information about threats in our region. We also propose to intensify cooperation among security advisors so that every country can approach the end of this war through diplomatic means.
The countries have scheduled the West 2025 exercises for September, and this means, experts say, that the first Russian troops will begin arriving in Belarus as early as 1st July. The total number of forces that will participate in the exercises has not yet been officially announced. At the beginning of the year, the Belarusians stated that these exercises would be the largest ever. Now, anonymous sources have told the Belarusian opposition outlet Zerkalo that we are talking about 100,000 military personnel.
According to the information we have received, it is possible that these exercises will take place in triangular formations. The first triangle is the border of Belarus, Lithuania and Poland, the well-known Suwałki corridor. The second triangle is the junction of the borders of Ukraine, Poland and Belarus. Accordingly, if the main exercises are held there, the European Union will be forced to pull its reserves to this section of the border to defend against a possible potential strike, and Ukraine will be forced to send part of its reserves to protect the Ukrainian border from the Belarusian side. I'm not ready to say whether aggression will be used or applied, but the very fact of creating these threats and risks will lead to certain consequences. Because if Ukraine is forced to pull some of its reserves, it will have fewer forces and capabilities to defend its territories at the front line and to liberate its territories. I think this might be the intention of both Putin and his ally Lukashenko.
It is known that for the Zapad 2025 exercises, the Belarusians are trying to involve international observers. Already now, the media are reporting that representatives from Hungary and Slovakia will be monitoring how the Union state plans to advance to the west. There were also observers at the large-scale exercises in 2021. And in fact, they were watching the plan for the destruction of Ukraine.
Education is just a means of pressure, Sergei Balabukov, for countries and demonstrations of their power capabilities. After all, following the exercises, there may be some kind of ultimatum, or it could even be announced during these exercises. If it is not accepted, the exercises could escalate into aggression. After all, let me remind you, the exercises began in December 2021, right? And yes, in December 2021, we heard Putin's ultimatum that NATO should return to the borders of 1997. That the Baltic countries should leave NATO because, according to the agreement on granting them sovereignty and independence after the collapse of the Soviet Union, one of the conditions was that they would not become members of anti-Russian blocs and would not join NATO. And this is exactly where the entire Russian narrative comes from. And these exercises stem from exactly that. That is, as soon as they begin, we will hear a new ultimatum. And the observers, they will act as agents of influence who will say, yes, there is such an armada that you cannot withstand it. They'll suggest it's better for you to negotiate while you still can. Well, to make concessions.
Announcer Mdin Paput. In an interview with Current Time, representatives of the organization Belpul, founded by Belarusian ex-law enforcement officers who opposed the Lukashenko regime, stated that, in their opinion, the Zapad 2025's exercises themselves do not pose a direct threat to the Baltic countries or Poland. But the military power of Minsk is only gaining momentum.
Andrei Kovalev, I was on the territory of Belarus when he could, by the year 2020, every year there will be the capacity to produce about 300,000 rocket projectiles for the Grad system, about 450,000 artillery shells, and over 100,000 unmanned aerial vehicles of various types. Virtually all Russian equipment, and even the oldest Russian equipment, will be modernized thanks to Belarusian enterprises that produce sites for armored vehicles.
Announcer, the year 2028. It was this year that NATO referred to as the year of a potential clash between the alliance and Russia. In many ways, the accuracy of this prediction depends on what kind of peace agreement the United States will impose. Ukrainian experts are less optimistic. In their opinion, the West could face military aggression from Russia and its satellites even earlier. And no one should be reassured by the fact that even now on the battlefield, the Russians are driving donkeys and cannon fodder from all over the world. They have enough forces for aggression against Ukraine, which is well versed in the conditions of modern warfare. That is why the democratic world must do everything possible to prevent training, combat coordination, and consequently aggression from the territory of Belarus. However, Ukraine's partners still do not even have a unified position on what role Belarus is playing at this stage of the war.
Darina Gutskalo. That's all from me for now. I was with you, Darina Gutskalo. Even more scorching news from the front in our next broadcast. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.